In the vast expanse of the Andromeda spiral where starlight danced between nebulas, older than memory itself, the Galactic Confederation had stood unchallenged for 7,000 years. 12 species, 47 worlds, one unbreakable law: civilized beings resolve conflicts through diplomacy, not violence. Until the humans arrived. The War Council chamber aboard the flagship Cathanari Ascendant hummed with the subtle vibration of hyperdrive engines pushing reality itself to its breaking point. Admiral Zarthakal, his six-armed form draped in the ceremonial crimson of the Hegemony High Command, studied the holographic display floating above the obsidian table. Each pulsing dot represented a human settlement. Each dot a violation of everything the Confederation held sacred. "Fascinating," murmured Chief Xenobiologist Nexvar, her crystalline features catching the ethereal glow of the tactical display. "The humans call it Earth. Third planet from an unremarkable yellow star. Gravity 1.2 standard units. Atmospheric pressure 1.4 standard. Surface temperature fluctuations that would kill most sentient species." Zethakal's primary arms gestured dismissively, while his secondary pair continued manipulating the hologram. "A death world, then. That explains their peculiarities." Peculiarities? The voice belonged to Captain Vorthek of the 5th Expeditionary Fleet, a creature whose species had evolved from predators, though 10 millennia of civilization had dulled their hunting instincts to mere ceremony. "Admiral, with respect, these peculiarities have cost us 17 ships and 3 entire battle groups." The chamber fell silent. In the corner, Junior Intelligence Officer Kickstel shifted nervously, his bioluminescent patches flickering in patterns that betrayed his anxiety. He'd been the first to decode human military transmissions. He'd been the first to witness what they were truly capable of. 17 ships, Zikael repeated, the words tasting bitter on his forked tongue, against a species that achieved spaceflight less than 2 centuries ago. A species that still wars among itself. A species that, according to our initial contact reports, greets strangers by crushing their appendages together. Nexaver's crystalline laughter tinkled like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "The humans call it a handshake, Admiral, a gesture of peace." "Peace." Zifkal's laugh was anything but melodic. "Tell that to the crew of the Silent Harmony. Tell that to Admiral Keltnan's widow." The truth was, none of them had expected resistance. First contact had gone according to protocol. Approach the dominant species, demonstrate superior technology, offer membership in the Confederation in exchange for compliance with galactic law. The humans had listened politely, asked thoughtful questions, requested time to consider the offer. Then they'd opened fire. "Show me again," Zythkul commanded. The holographic display shifted, revealing a 3-dimensional recording from the Silent Harmony's final moments. The massive dreadnought, 2 kilometers of gleaming metal and devastating firepower, hung motionless above Earth's largest continent. Below, primitive projectile weapons fired streams of metal at the ship's shields. Harmless, pathetic, amusing, until the nuclear missiles arrived. "Impossible," whispered Captain Vorsek, watching for the 100th time as the human weapons somehow penetrated shields designed to withstand the fury of collapsing stars. "Their technology is centuries behind ours. Their projectiles should have been absorbed without a trace." Korkstel's bioluminescent patches flared brighter. "Sir, if I may," his voice cracked like an adolescent's. "The humans, they don't just use technology to fight. They use everything. Physics, chemistry, biology. They turned their own planet's magnetic field into a weapon." "Explain." The young officer's tentacles trembled as he manipulated the display controls. Earth appeared in cross-section, its molten core spinning like a dynamo. "They launched their nuclear devices not at our ships, but at specific coordinates in space. The explosions created electromagnetic pulses that interfaced with their planet's natural magnetic field, amplifying the effect by orders of magnitude. Our shields are designed to stop energy weapons and projectiles, not planetary-scale electromagnetic phenomena." Silence stretched across the chamber like a held breath. Finally, Nexusvar spoke. "Ingenious. Barbaric," Zithkal corrected. "They weaponized their own world, and now they're coming for ours," added Vorthak grimly. "Indeed, Human ships had been detected throughout the sector. Crude vessels by Confederation standards, angular, aggressive designs that looked more like weapons than spacecraft. But effective, devastatingly so. 3 human fleets had carved through the outer defense perimeters like plasma through vacuum, leaving nothing but debris and distress beacons in their wake. Intelligence reports suggest they're led by a single individual, Ixtel continued, his patches now cycling through colors that indicated extreme distress. The other humans call him, difficult to translate, the Devil of Detroit. Detroit, one of their largest manufacturing centers, urban warfare training ground. The individual in question apparently survived 67 separate armed conflicts in that city alone before joining their space forces. Admiral Zarvakul's 6 arms went rigid. In Confederation space, conflict was resolved through negotiation, arbitration, or, in extreme cases, single combat between champions. The idea of surviving 67 battles was incomprehensible. Impossible. Unless you were dealing with humans. What do we know about this individual? Korvac's Till's display shifted again, revealing a grainy image captured from long-range sensors. A bipedal figure in primitive armor, scarred face partially concealed by a helmet bearing symbols that made no sense to alien eyes. The figure stood on the bridge of what appeared to be a converted mining vessel, surrounded by other humans who looked at him with something approaching reverence. Name Jackson Cross. Age approximately 43 standard years. Former urban combat specialist turned naval commander. The humans seemed to consider him their finest warrior. Finest. Nexvar leaned forward, her crystalline features reflecting the hologram's pale light. By what metric? Survival. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. In the Confederation, military service was ceremonial, a tradition maintained for historical purposes, not practical application. Wars were fought by automated systems, resolved by computers, ended by algorithms. The concept of individual warriors, flesh and blood beings who lived and died by violence, belonged to prehistory. Yet here were the humans, treating war as if it were an art form. Admiral Zythkull rose from his chair, all 6 arms spread in a gesture of resolution. Then we shall teach them the error of their ways. Captain Vorthek, ready the full battle fleet. We'll show these primitive mammals what true military might looks like. Sir, Kickstil's voice was barely a whisper. Perhaps we should consider alternative approaches. Negotiation, sanctions, diplomatic pressure. The time for diplomacy ended when they destroyed the silent harmony. Zythkull's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. These humans understand only violence. Very well. We'll speak their language. As the officers filed out to prepare for battle, none of them noticed the small addendum in Kickstil's intelligence report. A single line, buried in technical specifications and tactical assessments. Note, human military doctrine appears to treat impossible odds as a form of entertainment. Far across the void, aboard the converted cargo hauler Iron Maiden, Commander Jackson Cross studied his own tactical displays. 43 years old, scarred by more battles than any sane being should survive. He looked exactly like what he was, humanity's answer to a universe that had underestimated them. Admirals calling it Operation Thunderstorm, said his executive officer, Lieutenant Diana Park. Young, brilliant, and utterly fearless, exactly the kind of person the aliens would dismiss as primitive. Full frontal assault on their main battle group. Cross nodded slowly. Around them, the bridge crew worked with the quiet efficiency of professionals who'd learned their trade in humanity's urban combat zones. No ceremony, no tradition, just the cold pragmatism of beings who'd grown up on a world where everything, the weather, the wildlife, even the bacteria, was actively trying to kill them. Let me guess, Cross said, his voice carrying the gravelly tone of someone who'd breathed too much smoke and dust. They're expecting us to run. Yes, sir. Long-range sensors show 17 capital ships, 42 destroyers, and enough fighter craft to blot out the stars. They're calling it the largest Confederation fleet ever assembled. Cross smiled, an expression that would have terrified the aliens if they'd understood its significance. In human culture, that particular smile meant someone was about to do something spectacularly ill-advised. Outstanding. Diana, signal the other ships. Tell them we've got ourselves a proper fight. As orders flowed across the human fleet, Jackson Cross stood before the main view screen, watching distant starlight dance across the void. Somewhere out there, alien commanders were planning humanity's destruction, secure in their technological superiority and vast numerical advantage. They had no idea what they were about to face. Behind Cross, Weapons Officer Tommy Rodriguez called out, "Sir, we're reading massive energy signatures from the alien fleet. Looks like they're powering up for a full-scale engagement." "How many ships total?" "Approximately 600, sir." "And us?" 47 combat-capable vessels, sir." Cross nodded thoughtfully. In the old days back on Earth fighting gang wars in the ruins of Detroit, odds like these would have been considered suicide. But that was before humanity had learned to think in 3 dimensions, before they'd discovered that the universe's other species had forgotten what it meant to fight for survival. "Tommy, how's our special payload coming along?" "Loaded and ready, sir. Though I still think you're completely insane." "Probably." Cross's smile widened. "Signal the fleet, prepare for Operation Wildfire." Lieutenant Park looked up from her console, confusion evident in her dark eyes. "Sir, the Admiral called it Operation Thunderstorm. The Admiral's never been to Detroit." As the human ships began their final approach toward the assembled might of the Galactic Confederation, neither side fully understood what was about to unfold. The aliens saw primitive vessels crewed by savage beings from a death world, obstacles to be swept aside by superior technology and overwhelming force. The humans saw Tuesday. In the depths of space, 2 philosophies were about to collide. The Confederation's belief in order, technology, and civilized warfare versus humanity's hard-earned wisdom that in the end, only one rule mattered: survive. And Jackson Cross, the devil of Detroit, humanity's wildest warrior, was about to teach the galaxy exactly what that word meant. The first shots were fired, 17 minutes later. By then it was already too late for the aliens to learn that humans had never forgotten the most important lesson evolution could teach. Sometimes the only winning move is to be completely, utterly, magnificently insane. The battle began exactly as Admiral Zoithakol had predicted. Human vessels, ugly and angular against the starfield, accelerated toward the Confederation fleet in perfect formation. No evasive maneuvers. No tactical sophistication, just a straight-line charge toward overwhelming firepower. Precisely the kind of primitive thinking he'd expected from a Death World species. "Engaging primary batteries," announced Weapons Coordinator Thesarol, her 3-chambered heart beating with excitement. In 7,000 years of Confederation history, actual fleet combat had been relegated to simulation and ceremony. This would be her first real battle, her first chance to witness the awesome power of truly advanced military technology. Space erupted in light. Particle beams designed to crack asteroids lanced across the void, converging on the lid human vessel. Energy shields that could withstand solar flares triggered automatic responses, adapting to each incoming projectile with computational precision. The humans' primitive kinetic weapons, chunks of metal accelerated by chemical explosions, struck Confederation barriers and simply vanished. For exactly 14 seconds, everything proceeded according to doctrine. Then the human fleet disappeared. "What?" Zeetkol's 6 arms flailed in confusion as his tactical displays suddenly showed empty space where 47 enemy vessels had been moments before. "Where did they go?" "Sensor sweep indicates." "Admiral, this is impossible." "Report." Navigator Pelthak's bioluminescent patches flickered in patterns indicating complete bewilderment. "Sir, according to our instruments, the human ships are everywhere." The display updated, showing red dots scattered throughout the battle space, not in formation, not following any recognizable tactical pattern, but distributed seemingly at random across a 3-dimensional sphere surrounding the Confederation fleet. Some appeared below the galactic plane, others above. Several had somehow positioned themselves inside the fleet's formation. "Cloaking technology," suggested Captain Vortek. "Impossible," replied Nexivar, her crystalline features refracting light in agitated patterns. "Our sensors would detect any known stealth system." "Then how?" The answer came from the youngest member of the bridge crew. Korvac still analyzing sensor data with the desperate intensity of someone trying to understand the impossible. suddenly straightened as comprehension dawned. "They're not using stealth technology," he whispered. "They're using physics." "Explain." "The human ships. They didn't disappear. They used their momentum to slingshot around our gravity wells, then fired their engines on trajectories that took advantage of local space-time distortion. They're not hiding. They're riding gravitational currents we didn't even know existed." Admiral Zytakol stared at the tactical display, watching red dots dance through space in patterns that defied every rule of engagement he'd learned in 3 decades of service. The humans had turned the battlefield itself into a weapon, using stellar mechanics the way children might use playground equipment. "Ingenious," breathed Nexver. "Insane," corrected Zythkol. Both assessments were proven accurate when the humans opened fire. Aboard the Iron Maiden, Commander Jackson Cross watched enemy vessels struggle to track targets that refused to behave according to military doctrine. His crew worked with the quiet efficiency of people who'd learned to fight in 3 dimensions, not in open space but in the vertical maze of Earth's ruined cities. "Detroit rules," he muttered, using the phrase that had become humanity's unofficial military philosophy. "When the enemy expects you to fight fair, don't. When they bring superior technology, bring superior audacity. When they think they understand the battlefield, change the rules." "Tommy, light him up." Weapons Officer Rodriguez grinned as he activated systems that would have horrified any civilized species. Humans, having grown up on a planet where everything was toxic, radioactive, or carnivorous, had long ago abandoned the luxury of squeamishness. Their weapons reflected this pragmatic approach to survival. The first salvo consisted of modified mining charges, industrial explosives retrofitted with proximity sensors and guidance systems. Not sophisticated, but when accelerated to significant fractions of light speed, sophistication became irrelevant. The Confederation's energy shields, designed to deflect coherent beams and sophisticated projectiles, had no protocols for dealing with what amounted to flying bombs. 6 alien vessels vanished in expanding spheres of superheated plasma. "Target their command ship," Cross ordered, watching as the enemy formation tried to adapt to attacks coming from impossible angles. "Show them what happens when you pick a fight with Detroit." Lieutenant Park's fingers danced across her console, calculating firing solutions that violated every rule of engagement ever written. "Sir, we're reading massive energy spikes from their flagship. Looks like they're preparing some kind of super weapon." "Of course they are." Cross's scarred face split into that terrifying smile alien psychologists would later classify as a form of controlled insanity. "Diana, remember the Riverside incident?" Hawk's own smile was answer enough. During the urban wars, when gang leaders had tried to corner Cross's unit in an abandoned shopping center, he'd responded by demolishing the entire building. With everyone still inside, the logic had been simple. If you can't win the fight you're in, change it into a fight you can win. "Activating Hellfire Protocol," she announced. Across the human fleet, converted cargo vessels and refitted mining ships began implementing tactics that no sane military force would consider: ramming attacks at relativistic speeds, suicide runs carrying nuclear devices, coordinated strikes on gravitational anchor points that destabilized local space-time. But it was Jackson Cross himself who provided the moment that would become legend. Aboard the Q-Thnari Ascendant, Admiral Zythakol watched his sophisticated fleet being systematically dismantled by beings he'd dismissed as primitive. 17 capital ships reduced to debris, 42 destroyers scattered across the fighter squadrons annihilated by humans who treated impossible odds as a form of entertainment. "Sir," called out sensor operator Vexnal, "we're detecting a single human vessel approaching on direct intercept. It appears to be their command ship." Zythkol's rage finally overcame his tactical training. "One ship, one primitive vessel dares approach the flagship of the Confederation fleet? Sir, perhaps we should destroy it. All batteries. Concentrated fire. I want that human abomination reduced to its component atoms." Every weapon on the Q-Thnari Ascendant turned toward the approaching human vessel: particle beams, plasma cannons, gravitational disruptors, enough firepower to sterilize a small moon. The alien crew watched with grim satisfaction as their targeting computers achieved perfect lock. They fired. The human ship vanished in a ball of incandescent energy that briefly outshone the system's star. For a moment silence reigned on the alien bridge. Finally, someone had shown these primitive mammals the futility of challenging superior technology. Then the Iron Maiden emerged from the explosion, completely unharmed. Impossible. Zithikal's 6 arms gestured frantically at the tactical display. No ship could survive that barrage. Kofikstel, still analyzing sensor data, provided the answer in a voice barely above a whisper. Sir, they didn't survive it. They used it. Explain. The human vessel fired a series of gravitational charges just before our weapons struck. The explosions created a localized space-time distortion that redirected our energy back along its point of origin. They didn't tank our attack. They reflected. On the main view screen, the human ship continued its approach, growing larger with each passing second. Its hull bore the scars of countless battles. Its weapons were jury-rigged collections of mining equipment and industrial tools, and its crew consisted of beings that had learned warfare on a planet where violence was a survival skill. But it was the message painted across the ship's prow that truly captured the human approach to impossible situations. Detroit or die. Admiral, came a voice from the communications station. We're receiving a transmission from the human vessel. Audio only. Put it through. The voice that filled the bridge belonged to Jackson Cross, gravelly, confident, and carrying the tone of someone who'd just figured out exactly how to win an unwinnable fight. Confederation fleet, the human said. This is Commander Cross of the Terran Navy. You've got about 30 seconds to surrender before things get really unpleasant. Zuthikal's laughter was sharp and bitter. Surrender? You're outnumbered 600 to 1. Yeah. I noticed. Seems like a fair fight. The alien admiral's confusion was audible in his voice. Fair? How is this possibly fair? Well, Cross replied. Conversationally, you brought 600 ships to kill 47 humans. Back where I come from, we call that Thursday. Before Zithkol could respond, every human ship in the system simultaneously activated systems that had been charging during the entire battle. Not weapons. Something far more terrifying. Each vessel began broadcasting a signal that interfaced directly with the fundamental forces holding the local star system together. They were turning the sun into a weapon. Sir, Kickstil's bioluminescent patches flashed in patterns indicating panic. The humans have somehow synchronized their vessels with the stellar magnetic field. They're creating a cascade resonance that will destabilize the entire system. Admiral Zithkal stared at the tactical display, watching as the star at the center of everything began to pulse with unnatural rhythms. The humans hadn't just weaponized their planet, they'd weaponized an entire solar system. But he whispered, that will kill everyone, including them. Jackson Cross's voice crackled across the communication channel one final time. Admiral, let me explain something about humans. We didn't climb to the top of our world's food chain by being reasonable. We did it by being absolutely, completely, magnificently insane. And sometimes, the star pulsed brighter. Sometimes the only way to win is to be willing to lose everything. In the depths of space, surrounded by the burning wreckage of ships that had underestimated what humans were capable of, Admiral Zithkal finally understood what they were truly fighting. Not primitive mammals from a death world, but survivors of a planet so harsh that they'd learned to treat the impossible as merely improbable. The communication channel fell silent. The star continued to pulse, and somewhere in the darkness, Jackson Cross waited for the aliens to decide whether they wanted to find out just how far humans were willing to go to protect their home. The answer would reshape the galaxy forever. Time moved differently when stars began to die. Admiral Zithkal watched his chronometer tick through seconds that felt like hours, each moment bringing the system closer to catastrophic collapse. The human ships maintained their positions, 47 dots of reflected starlight against the cosmic dark, while the sun they'd somehow weaponized pulsed with increasingly violent energy. Status report, he demanded, though part of him already knew the answer would change nothing. Stellar instability increasing exponentially, reported Nexiver, her crystalline features reflecting the angry red light now emanating from the system's primary. At current rates, we have approximately 11 minutes before total system collapse. And the human vessels? Maintaining position. No sign of retreat or evasive action. Korvaxtel's bioluminescent patches had settled into the steady blue glow that indicated profound thoughtfulness. Sir, I don't think they're bluffing. According to their cultural files, humans have a concept called mutually assured destruction. They're perfectly willing to die if it means taking their enemies with them. Silence stretched across the bridge, like a physical thing. In 7,000 years of Confederation history, no species had ever demonstrated such casual disregard for their own survival. Wars were fought by rules, ended by negotiation, resolved through compromise. The idea that an entire species might choose extinction over defeat was beyond alien comprehension. Until now. Commander Cross. Zeethkal activated the communication system, his voice carefully controlled despite the chaos unfolding around them. Surely we can reach some accommodation. The Confederation is not unreasonable. We can negotiate terms. Admiral. The human's voice crackled across space with the same casual confidence he'd shown throughout the battle. Let me stop you right there. See, the thing about humans is, once we decide something needs doing, we tend to see it through. And right about now I'm thinking your people need to learn a lesson about picking fights with species that grew up in hell. Through the main view screen, Earth was visible as a small blue dot, impossibly fragile against the vast darkness, orbiting a star that had already tried to kill its children through solar flares, magnetic storms, and radiation that would have sterilized any other world. Yet somehow humanity had not only survived but thrived, turning their planet's hostility into a source of strength. Commander, Zeethkal tried again. Your actions will result in the deaths of billions. Not just our people, your own as well. Jackson Cross's laughter was like broken glass. Admiral, let me tell you a story. When I was 12 years old, my neighborhood got invaded by a rival gang. 43 armed adults against maybe a dozen kids and their families. Everyone said we should run, find somewhere else to live. You know what we did instead? The star pulsed brighter, its surface now visibly churning with magnetic storms that defied natural law. We booby-trapped every building, poisoned every water source, and turned our own homes into killing grounds. Took 3 weeks, but when it was over, that rival gang, they decided maybe they didn't want our territory after all. Cost us everything we had, but we kept what mattered. Your homes, Zeethkal said slowly. Our pride. The word hung in vacuum like a death sentence. Pride, the one emotion that apparently trumped every survival instinct evolution had managed to instill in the human species. The aliens had dismissed it as primitive posturing, never realizing it was the force that had driven humanity from caves to starships in a few millennia. Sir, interrupted Captain Vorthak. Incoming transmission from Confederation High Command. Priority Alpha. The communication channel switched, revealing the ethereal form of Supreme Chancellor Wexeneth, leader of 12 species, ruler of 47 worlds, and the single most powerful being in known space. Her translucent features radiated the kind of ancient authority that came from millennia of unchallenged rule. Admiral Zeethkal. Her voice carried the weight of absolute law. You will withdraw your forces immediately. The Confederation Council has voted to accept human terms. Chancellor? Zeethkal's 6 arms moved in gestures of confusion. What terms? Complete withdrawal from the Sol system. Recognition of humanity as a sovereign species. And, her pause stretched like eternity. Formal acknowledgement that Earth-born humans are to be classified as a protected Deathworld species under Galactic Convention 77 Alpha. The implications hit the alien admiral like a physical blow. Protected Deathworld species, a classification reserved for beings so dangerous that contact was restricted to emergency situations. In 7,000 years of Confederation history, only 2 species had ever earned that designation. Both were extinct, having destroyed themselves through their own aggression. Now there would be a third. Chancellor. Zeethkal's voice carried desperate undertones. Surely this is premature. We have them outgunned 600 to 1. A tactical retreat, regrouping with additional force. Admiral Chancellor Wax's interruption carried the finality of a judge pronouncing sentence. In the past 4 hours, these humans have demonstrated the ability to weaponize gravity, turn solar systems into bombs, and coordinate tactical maneuvers that our best military computers classify as physically impossible. More importantly, they've proven they would rather die than submit to external authority. Through the viewscreen, the human fleet maintained its deadly vigil, 47 ships crewed by beings that had learned warfare on a planet where everything, the weather, the wildlife, the very ground itself, was actively trying to kill them. The Confederation, the Chancellor continued, has never encountered a species willing to destroy entire star systems rather than accept defeat. Our xenopsychologists classify this behavior as evolutionary insanity. Our military advisors call it tactically brilliant. Our philosophers, she paused again. Our philosophers are requesting immediate retirement. Admiral Zorvkal looked around his bridge at faces that reflected his own bewilderment. They'd come to punish primitive mammals for violating galactic law. Instead, they'd discovered that humanity's definition of law began and ended with a simple principle: leave us alone, or find out why evolution made us this way. All Confederation forces, the Chancellor's voice carried across every frequency, you are ordered to withdraw beyond the outer boundary of the Sol system. Immediately, as alien ships began powering down weapons and adjusting course for home, Jackson Cross's voice crackled one final time across the communication channels. Admiral Zorvkal, you still there? Yes, Commander. Just wanted to say thanks for the workout. It's been a while since we had a decent fight. The star's pulsing began to slow as human ships gradually reduced their interference with local stellar mechanics. Crisis averted through the simple expedient of making the alternative too terrible to contemplate. Commander Cross, Zorvkal found himself asking, despite every protocol violation it represented, may I ask you something? Shoot, would you really have destroyed the entire system? Killed billions of beings, including your own people? To pause, stretched long enough for several heartbeats before the human replied, Admiral, let me ask you something back. When you decided to attack Earth, what did you think would happen? We expected you to surrender, to accept Confederation authority like every other species. And when we didn't, we expected you to fight conventionally, ship against ship, technology against technology. Cross's laughter was soft, almost gentle. See, that's the difference between your people and mine. You expected us to fight your war. We expected you to learn ours. As the Confederation fleet began its long journey home, leaving humanity in possession of their small corner of the galaxy, Admiral Zorvkal found himself studying intelligence reports that painted an increasingly disturbing picture of what they'd narrowly avoided. Earth wasn't just a death world, it was a planet that had spent 4 billion years perfecting new and inventive ways to kill everything that lived on it. Humans weren't just survivors, they were the final product of an evolutionary process that had eliminated every species that couldn't adapt, improvise, and overcome impossible odds. Most disturbing of all, the aliens had only seen humanity's opening move. Deep in the classified sections of his intelligence files, Kixtel had included a single line that would haunt Confederation leadership for generations to come. Note, human military records indicate that Stellar Disruption Protocol is classified as a non-lethal demonstration of intent. 6 months later, when the first human trade vessels appeared at Confederation space stations, their crews were received with the kind of nervous respect usually reserved for gods or natural disasters. The traders smiled, exchanged gifts, and conducted business with the same casual friendliness they'd shown during first contact. But every alien who met them remembered the lesson of the Sol system. Behind those smiles lay the willingness to turn stars into weapons rather than accept defeat. Admiral Zorvkal, reassigned to a peaceful scientific expedition in the galaxy's outer spiral, kept a single human artifact on his desk, a small sign that read "Welcome to Detroit, where the weak are killed and eaten." He'd never been able to determine whether it was meant as a joke. The uncertainty, he'd learned, was the point. Humanity had introduced a new concept to the galaxy. The idea that some species were too dangerous to conquer, too stubborn to intimidate, and too insane to predict. They'd earned their independence not through superior technology or overwhelming force, but through the simple demonstration that they were willing to pay any price, including their own extinction, to remain free. In the years that followed, as human colonies spread throughout previously unexplored sectors and human vessels became a common sight at trading stations across the galaxy, one phrase began appearing in Confederation military manuals. When engaging human forces, remember they consider impossible odds a form of entertainment. It was listed under the section marked Warnings. Jackson Cross, now promoted to Admiral of the Terran Deep Space Fleet, occasionally received messages from alien commanders seeking advice on tactics, strategy, or the finer points of stellar mechanics. He answered them all with the same helpful enthusiasm he'd shown during that first terrible battle. After all, he'd once told a gathering of Confederation military officers, the galaxy was big enough for everyone. As long as they remembered one simple rule: don't pick fights with species that grew up in hell. Unless, of course, you're feeling lucky.